Mark Drakeford, what do you think Keir Starmer should do right now?
It hasn't worked out, and it's time to recognise that and make a plan to move ahead. It is irrecoverable, both his own personal standing and his ability to lead an effective government.
Does Andy Burnham know he's got your support?
Yes.
Will you be going to make a field to campaign on his behalf?
I hope to do that, quite definitely.
How did you feel about Leonard Morgan losing her seat?
I thought that was a desperately sad moment.
Did you ever imagine it would be that bad, the scale of the defeat?
It was at the worst end of what I expected. My own view is that the strategy pursued by the Labour Party in Wales was the wrong one.
Mark Drakeford, what do you think Keir Starmer should do right now?
I think Keir Starmer should set out a timetable for a change in leadership of the United Kingdom Labour Party and the United Kingdom itself. He is a decent man who works extremely hard every day to do his very best. But a combination of circumstances and capacity mean that it hasn't worked out, and it's time to recognise that and make a plan to move ahead.
Do you think he should step down?
Yeah, I think he should, but I think he should do it in a planned way, in a dignified way, in a way that allows for a smooth transition.
Why do you think he should step down?
Because I think it is irrecoverable, both his own personal standing and his ability to lead an effective government. On the doorstep, and I think quite unfairly, there was a level of hostility towards the Prime Minister which I don't think can be recovered. And when a Prime Minister is in a position where every day the Whitehall machine and Westminster are contemplating the end of his premiership, it just means he can't operate as a Prime Minister, as a Prime Minister needs to do.
Do you really think a seventh Prime Minister in 10 years is the answer to all our problems right now?
Well, I don't think it's a good look. I wouldn't have planned it that way at all. But the fact that the Tories had a serial revolving door of Prime Ministers shouldn't stop the Labour Party from doing the right thing.
And what sort of timetable are you talking about? How soon should he step down?
Well, I don't think it's up to me to micromanage the process.
But are we talking about weeks or months?
Well, if there is a precedent of any sort, it would be that Boris Johnson stood down, not very different in terms of timing to the current Prime Minister. There was a contest over the summer and then a new Prime Minister in place for September. I don't think that's a bad precedent in terms of the timetable.
Who would you like to see taking Labour into the next general election?
Well, if Andy Burnham is successful in the by-election, which I hope he will be, then I will be a strong supporter of his candidature to become the next leader of the party and the Prime Minister. And
why Andy Burnham and not other potential contenders like Wes Streeting, for instance?
Well, I think it's very important for the Labour Party to have a leader who is not London-based. We've had a series of leaders who are rooted in the southeast of the United Kingdom. We need somebody who speaks authentically for the wider United Kingdom, the regions of England, the nations of the United Kingdom. I think Andy is uniquely placed to do that, and that's why he will have my strong support.
So you see in Andy Burnham a means for Wales to get more devolved powers, perhaps because of his views about decentralising power from Westminster in England?
Well, there's no doubt that he's a convinced devolutionist, and he has seen it from both ends of the telescope. He's been a senior member of a UK government, and now he knows what it's like to be on the receiving end of decisions made in Whitehall.
Does Andy Burnham know he's got your support?
Yes.
Have you had a conversation with him recently?
I've had a very brief conversation with him face-to-face when he was in Cardiff in the last few weeks, and I've been in touch with him both by text and through the team of people who surround him.
And what did he say?
Well, at that point there was no by-election, and he was simply thinking through what his options would be, but I wanted to make sure that he knew that, were he in a position to stand, he would have friends here in Wales who would be keen to support him.
And when you talk about friends in Wales, how much support would he have within Welsh Labour, do you think?
Well, I believe that he will have a strong majority of Welsh Labour members wanting to support him. I think his views fit very well where the centre of gravity is in the Welsh Labour Party.
Will you be going to Makerfield to campaign on his behalf?
I hope to do that, quite definitely.
And what if he doesn't win this by-election? What happens then?
Well, I think there will be another candidate who represents the sorts of views that Andy represents. And there are other
who would that be?
Well, a couple of obvious candidates, aren't there? They will be Angie Rayner, and if Angie were to be the standard bearer of that strand in the party's opinion, then I will equally be very keen to support her too.
But you used to criticise the Tories when they changed leaders. What did you say after Theresa May stepped down? We cannot afford the economic damage while time is being frittered away on a Tory leadership election.
Nobody would have wanted this to be the outcome of the last election. I absolutely wanted Keir Starmer to succeed. I absolutely wanted the many strengths he has to be at the forefront of this government. But it hasn't turned out that way.
Let's talk about the elections in Wales. Colossal defeat for Labour, the end of 27 years of Labour leading the government in Wales, the end of 100 years of electoral dominance by Labour in Wales. What did you make of what happened?
Well, I think it was very distressing. But it wasn't just the day of the results that was distressing. The whole month of the campaign was very difficult indeed. I have never been in a campaign where the level of outright hostility, sometimes amounting to aggression towards the Labour Party and individual people doing a democratic job of knocking people's doors and telling them that an election is on. The level of hostility that people experience was something that I've never experienced, and I've knocked doors in every national election since 1974.
What did people say to you about Keir Starmer? Is there there a particular instance that stands out?
Well, and in my mind, in a way, it's not a typical example, but I knocked the door of an elderly lady. She was certainly in her 80s, I would say. She was certainly going to vote for the Conservative Party, as she had done throughout her life. And she said to me, well, he's just hopeless, dear, in a very sort of gentle way, really. But she just made her mind up that I'm afraid that the Prime Minister just wasn't up to the job.
How did you feel about Eluned Morgan losing her seat?
I thought that was a desperately sad moment. She inherited a Labour group that was badly damaged by the previous leadership election, and she held that group together right to the very final day of the Senedd term. The Labour administration from 2021 to 2026 offered the people of Wales competent progressive government right up till the last day, and that's a real tribute to Eluned. And it's a great personal sadness to me that she won't be there in the next Senedd.
Did you ever imagine it would be that bad, the scale of the defeat?
It was at the worst end of what I expected, but the opinion polls were pretty consistent by the end that it was going to be a very difficult night.
What went wrong for Labour in Wales?
Well, the hill was very steep to climb. Every time you win an election, it gets harder to win the next one. Time for a change is about the most potent slogan there is in politics, and it was played ruthlessly against Labour, and this time it stuck. It didn't stick to the same extent in earlier elections, and this time it did. My own view is that the strategy pursued by the Labour Party in Wales was the wrong one. We set out to placate people who were never going to be placatable, and in the process we stopped talking to the people who in the past have helped us to construct a majority.
So you're talking about trying to placate reform voters?
Yeah, we spent our time trying to find ways in which we would stop votes leaving to reform, but votes didn't leave us to reform. Votes left us to other progressive parties. And
you've written an article which will be published later on the Nation Cymru website, in which you talk about this being part of the McSweeney doctrine, a reference to Morgan McSweeney, who is the former Chief of Staff for Keir Starmer.
Yes.
You think he's responsible for that targeting of voters?
Well, the McSweeney doctrine really is that reform is the the party we have most to fear, and that in the end, people who vote Labour have nowhere else to go. They will always have to vote Labour in order to keep out a party of the right. Unfortunately, in Wales, that was wrong diagnostically, and it was wrong in practice as well, because people in Wales who want a progressive government have other choices, and we saw them exercise those choices.
Well, why didn't Welsh Labour stand up to Morgan McSweeney and say that's not going to work here?
Well, there obviously are people in the Welsh Labour Party who didn't just not stand up to it, they were believers in that analysis. We should have been fighting on the progressive ground. We abandoned that ground and pursued a different strategy, which in the end, I'm afraid, contributed to our loss.
But you were there. You were in the Senate. You are an influential voice in the Labour Party. Why didn't you stand up and say, we're getting this wrong?
Well, you have those discussions in the run-up to an election inside the party, not publicly. I've never, ever...
So you were saying we're on the wrong track.
There's always a debate inside the party, and certainly, my view would have been that we needed to fight the election in a different way. Not in the way that Eluned Morgan fought it, because I thought she fought a most energetic campaign. But the messages she was given to deliver were messages that simply didn't speak to the times we were in.
You've said that the Welsh Labour Party was neither sufficiently Welsh nor sufficiently Labour. That's your feeling about the campaign?
Look, Welsh Labour, that's the flag that we have flown under. That's the flag we have succeeded under.
How, in your view, did Keir Starmer damage your party's chances in Wales at these last elections?
Well, I'm afraid in two ways. There were decisions made very early by the new UK Labour government that sent a message to voters that this was not the Labour government that they were expecting.
Like what?
Well, the winter fuel allowance decision echoed right through this election.
How damaging was that, do you think?
I think it was fundamentally damaging. Not just the issue itself, but the signal it sent about the sort of Labour government this was going to be. So there are things that applied right across the United Kingdom, and that's probably the most emblematic one. And then there were specific failures of the UK government in relation to Wales, and particularly in relation to the devolution agenda. The ground on which the Welsh Labour Party was founded in the modern period was devolution. That was our unique selling point. That is what distinguished Labour from the unionist right and the nationalists on the other side of the spectrum.
So in what way do you think that was being undermined by the Keir Starmer administration?
Because it offered us nothing that we could go to the Welsh public 2 years into that government to show that that was a government genuinely in the devolution tradition. You could not point to a single thing that had happened in that 2 years that had strengthened Welsh devolution.
And what impact did all of this have on the campaign, do you think?
Well, I think it cut the ground from under us.
But you saw what the UK government said about what they'd delivered in Wales with the development, the nuclear development in Wilver, the AI growth zones, the supposed £14 billion worth of funding for rail infrastructure that's due to be coming to Wales?
Lots to celebrate. I want to make sure I make that point. There's lots that the Labour government has done that I want to celebrate and would have wanted to have celebrated to people in Wales, but I would have wanted to do it alongside a strong demonstration that the UK government, this Labour government in Westminster, was as equally committed to devolution as was the Blair government and the Brown government.
I mean, it's all very convenient, isn't it, for you to point the finger at Keir Starmer or at stuff that happened in Wales after you stepped down as First Minister. But what about your own record in government in Wales over 27 years? There is a lot of anger out there about the state of the NHS under a Welsh Labour government. There's a lot of anger about consistently weak performances in schools as judged by the PISA table, anger over economic inactivity, over poverty, and all of this under Welsh Labour governments you advised, you served in, and ultimately led. Mm-hmm. And maybe, Mark Drakeford, you are a big part of the problem here.
Look, I start my article by listing a whole series of issues that are issues for the Labour Party in Wales, including some of those issues. It would be foolish to look the other way from them. What I try to be in my piece is genuinely analytical. I try to look in the mirror and see where we didn't do as well as we should have done, as well as where I think there were other factors at play.
I mean, Jo Stevens, the current Labour Secretary of State for Wales, certainly thinks your government got its priorities wrong. She wrote the other day, somewhere along the way, the party became distracted by causes such as 20 miles an hour speed policy and tree planting in Uganda that were miles away from the bread and butter issues that people care about the most. And there are plenty who'd agree with that.
Well, I absolutely do not agree with that. The Welsh Government during the last 5 years spent its whole time dealing with a series of issues that were absolutely at the very forefront of what people needed to know about. Some things that were not of our own making.
The point is, you know, if you are arguing that maybe Keir Starmer has a bit of a blind spot when it comes to Wales, maybe you've got a bit of a blind spot when it comes to your record in government.
I think if anybody wants to read the article, you'll find that that isn't the case at all. I recognise it. It's part of the mix. I don't think it's the dominant part in the mix, and I certainly don't think it is the single explanation for what happened to the Labour Party on the 7th of May.
Is it existential for the Labour Party in Wales at the moment?
I don't believe that. I've read the obituary of the Labour Party decade after decade, you know, from the 1980s onwards. It's a very challenging moment, but all these things come with opportunities to rebuild. But I think that job is there to be done.
Mark Drakeford, thank you very much.
Thank you.